Hey guys, tonight we are standing under a vast Mesopotamian sky, the kind where the stars feel so close you could practically lean forward and scoop one up. The air is heavy with heat that never seems to fully leave the land, even after sunset. Somewhere far off, you hear the faint lapping of the Euphrates against its banks, a reminder that this whole civilization clings to the gifts of the rivers. Above you looms a massive brick tower, a ziggurat, its stairways tilting toward the heavens. Priests, robed in linen that probably smells like incense mixed with sweat, are climbing step after step, clutching clay tablets as if they were passes to the VIP section of the sky. And here you are, tagging along, feeling oddly underdressed in your imaginary sandals. You're about to witness the earliest stargazing parties in history, minus the telescopes, snacks, and Spotify playlists. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, let me know where you are in the world and what time it is as you're tuning in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the ziggurat steps, each brick rough underfoot. The higher you climb, the more the city shrinks, its flat roofs fading into shadows, its fires flickering like fireflies. Up here, away from the clatter of markets and bleating goats, the heavens feel a little closer. Babylonian priests believed this rooftop gave them front-row seats to the gods' theater. Every star, every wandering planet, every occasional blot of darkness across the moon, these weren't random. They were coded messages, divine memos written across the firmament. One priest, gray-bearded and squinting, points upward with a reed stylus. You follow his finger and notice a faint halo around the moon. He murmurs to another priest who dutifully scratches symbols onto a damp clay tablet. To you, it looks like chicken scratch, but it's actually one of the earliest attempts at systematic record-keeping in science. Mainstream historians often call this the very foundation of astronomy, though the priests themselves would say they were just doing their job, keeping the gods happy and the king from freaking out about bad omens. The quirky part is how much multitasking these sky watchers had to do. By day, they managed temple affairs, brewing up offerings, organizing rituals, and occasionally scolding people for skipping sacrifices. By night, they transformed into full-time cosmic accountants, logging every twinkle in the heavens. Imagine your work hours being sunset to whenever the moon goes down. No hazard pay, but plenty of celestial drama. As you lean against a warm brick, the smell of bitumen wafting up, you realize the priests weren't just gazing idly. They thought each flicker in the sky forecasted events down. Below, a dimmed moon. Maybe the king should cancel a war. A wandering planet close to a star? Time to prepare for famine. It sounds wild, but here's the kicker. Over centuries, these repeated logs accidentally turned into a proto-science. They noticed cycles. Eclipses, they realized, weren't random at all. They had a rhythm. And once you catch a rhythm, you can predict. Historians still argue whether the priests truly believed they were deciphering divine messages, or if some of them secretly enjoyed the pattern spotting more than the prophecy selling. Were they all in on the performance, or were a few closet nerds just geeking out over lunar cycles? The tablets don't exactly come with confessional footnotes. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. You glance down and see torches moving in the city below. People probably had no idea what the priests were up to on the ziggurat rooftop. For the common Babylonian, the heavens were background wallpaper. Pretty, yes, but more pressing concerns included whether the barley harvest would survive another flood. The irony is that those very harvests might have depended on the priests' readings of the skies. An eclipse interpreted as a bad omen could mean new temple rituals, perhaps even redirecting labor or resources, all because of a shadow sliding across the moon. As the night deepens, you start noticing how clear the stars are. No light pollution, no smog, just infinite pinpricks stretching across blackness. A planet glimmers with steady light, not twinkling like the stars. You squint, wondering how these priests, without telescopes, distinguished Venus from a star. Yet they did, consistently. They gave Venus the nickname, the Torch of the Heavens, and its appearances and disappearances were so regular that whole tablets are devoted just to that one planet. It's like ancient astronomy fan fiction, except the plot dictated earthly events. The ziggurat wind whistles around your ears, carrying with it the faint scent of date palms and cooking fires. You try not to laugh as one priest mutters something about crocodiles. Turns out, in their endless lists of remedies and omens, someone once recommended crocodile dung mixed with other ingredients as a sun lotion. You probably won't survive this recipe, but it makes you appreciate that at least their astronomy was more accurate than their skincare. You yawn, not from boredom, but from the slow lull of watching these men squint at the sky, hour after hour. One of them leans down to record another symbol. That tablet will dry, harden, and possibly sit forgotten in a temple library for centuries until some archaeologist in the 19th century digs it up, squints in the same puzzled way, and realizes he's holding the world's first spreadsheet of eclipses. Your eyes trace the constellations overhead. They're not the same stories you grew up with. No Big Dipper, no Orion. Instead, you're staring at the Plough, the Great Twins, and the Scorpion. Each constellation mapped not only the stars, but also a whole world view. Their calendar, their rituals, even their excuses for why the king had a bad day all hinged on these dots of light. And you, perched here tonight, get the sense that, in a weird way, you're watching humanity's first long-running science experiment. The rooftop quiets. The priests are kneeling, heads bowed, as the moon slips into shadow. An eclipse begins, and though you know it's just Earth blocking sunlight, they see it as the gods leaning close to whisper secrets. The air grows still, as if the city below is holding its breath. You, too, feel the hush of centuries pressing in. The shadow creeps slowly across the moon, and you can feel how every heartbeat in the city below seems tied to that dimming light. People in the narrow streets are probably peeking upward nervously, whispering to their children that the gods are taking a sip of the moon's milk. Up here on the ziggurat, the priests are scribbling furiously, their reed pens scraping against soft clay. You lean closer and catch sight of the repeating signs, almost like someone inventing sheet music before music itself had notation. The repetition is no accident. They're tracking a cycle, and though they don't have the word Saros, that's exactly what they're stumbling toward. A Saros cycle is about 18 years and 11 days. That's the magical number the Babylonians kept bumping into, the interval after which a nearly identical eclipse happens again. You watch as the gray-bearded priest points to a tablet already hardened and tucked in a basket at his side. He taps it knowingly, like a professor reminding the class that, yes, this material will be on the final exam. His younger apprentice nods in awe. This is the moment when sky watching mutates into pattern recognition, and pattern recognition mutates into prediction. You imagine the glee of the first time they realized they could say, "Hey, remember that thing that freaked everyone out last generation? It's coming back, so brace yourselves." In a world without Google Calendar alerts, that's basically wizardry, and it gave the priests enormous political power. If you can forecast the heavens, you can claim you're chatting directly with the gods, which means kings listen, merchants tremble, and farmers mutter prayers a little louder at the altar. Still, historians argue about whether the Babylonians fully understood why eclipses happen. Some say they had inklings of the geometry, sun, moon, earth lining up like beads on a string. Others think they were content just to know when, not necessarily why. After all, you don't need to know the physics of a bus to predict when it'll show up at the stop. The fact that they noticed the rhythm at all is staggering enough. The quirky side of this story is how messy some of the records are. Clay tablets were heavy, fragile, and prone to cracks. Imagine a poor apprentice dropping one halfway down the ziggurat stairs. Suddenly, the god's grand message looks like a jigsaw puzzle. Some fragments recovered by archaeologists show partial calculations, incomplete cycles, and even doodles that might just be the ancient equivalent of margin notes like, ugh, another eclipse. It's a reminder that behind the aura of cosmic prophecy, these were still human beings with tired eyes and sore backs. As you shift on the rooftop, you notice another priest pouring out a small libation of beer. It trickles across the bricks, gleaming in the moonlight. To them, this ritual isn't optional. Predicting a celestial event is one thing, but appeasing the gods who allowed you to peek into their playbook is another. It's like submitting not just your homework, but also a bribe to the teacher, just to be safe. The silence of the night is broken by the cry of an owl. Its wings slice across the starlight, and the priests take it as a sign. You can't help but chuckle softly. Somewhere, a Babylonian scholar probably kept a list like, if owl hoots once, good harvest. If owl hoots twice, bad harvest. If owl poops on your tablet, disaster. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it wouldn't surprise you. Down below, the city is reacting too. Housewives are covering water jars, afraid the eclipse will taint the liquid. Soldiers are muttering about postponing drills. Even the king might be peering from his palace window, waiting for his advisors to deliver the verdict. That's the ripple effect of this rooftop science experiment. A shadow across the moon doesn't just dim the night, it changes decisions, delays wars, and reshapes lives. One tablet from the city of Uruk, if you could read it, would tell you about Shulgi's eclipse, a particularly memorable event in which the king allegedly performed extra sacrifices to dodge bad luck. Whether that actually prevented disaster is up for debate, but it shows how eagerly rulers latched onto these cosmic forecasts. It wasn't just curiosity, it was survival strategy. The air grows cooler as the eclipse deepens. The priests, though solemn, are also quietly pleased. Their predictions lined up with reality, and that means more faith in their authority. You realize you're witnessing the very seat of science: trial, record, pattern, prediction. It's not wrapped in lab coats and chalkboards. It's cloaked in incense smoke and priestly robes. But the bones of the method are all here. You rub your eyes. The hours drag on, but somehow time feels stretchy up here, like you're suspended between the heavens and the earth. And maybe you are. The moon is glowing faintly red now, a blood moon, though the Babylonians might see it as the gods nibbling at a celestial fruit. To you, it looks hauntingly beautiful, like an ember hanging in the sky. Historians still argue whether common citizens ever caught on to the cycle, or if the knowledge was jealously guarded by the priestly elite. Was this the secret sauce of a few, or did word spread over beer mugs in taverns? The debate continues, though the dusty tablets suggest at least some of the knowledge leaked out over time. After all, secrets rarely stay secrets for centuries. The eclipse wanes, light returning in delicate slivers. The priests breathe easier, murmuring thanks. One of them, younger and perhaps a little cheekier than the rest, smirks as if to say, "Told you so." You grin. If predicting eclipses isn't the ultimate ancient flex, what is? The moonlight lingers faintly on the clay as the priests roll up their damp reed mats and shuffle back down the stairway of the ziggurat. You trail behind them, half curious, half entranced, as though their soft leather sandals whisper secrets against the stone. At the base, you find a small chamber lit by flickering oil lamps. The air is heavy with the smell of baked bread and charred incense. This is where the sky turns into numbers. They sit cross-legged before broad clay tablets, pressing wedge-shaped signs that look like tiny bird tracks. You notice rows and rows of repeating notches. It doesn't take long to realize these are not random scratches. They are columns of numbers stacked like a careful tower. Each mark records a date, a phase, a cycle, a reminder. You're staring at the earliest spreadsheets in human history. No Excel formulas, No pivot tables, just the sheer patience of human memory pressed into earth. One priest chuckles softly as he sprinkles sand over a freshly marked tablet to dry it. Another is muttering aloud, converting lunar months into intervals of 29.5 days. Their arithmetic feels clunky, yet undeniably precise. They know a lunar year is about 11 days short of a solar year, and that gap matters. That gap can make their predictions wobble if not carefully adjusted. Watching them correct with little extra marks is like watching someone constantly sharpen a quill. Tedious, but essential. Here comes your mainstream fact for the night. The Babylonians were among the first to use a sexagesimal, or base 60 system. 60 still lingers today in our 60 minutes and 60 seconds. You see them scribble not just 1 and 2, but subtle variations of those wedge marks that unlock fractions far finer than you expected. Their system is a little like an old pocket watch. Odd at first, but surprisingly elegant once you get the hang of it. Still, historians argue whether they fully grasped the theoretical beauty of base 60 or whether it was just a practical inheritance from earlier Sumerian merchants counting bushels of grain. Did they philosophize about its endless divisibility, or were they simply happy to divide a field into neat chunks? Either way, the system stuck like glue, and even your wall clock today owes a quiet debt to their stubborn wedge marks. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the tablets aren't just numbers. They're half numbers, half gossip. Archaeologists have found cuneiform notes where a scribe casually inserts phrases like, "The king is ill," or "Rain has not come." Imagine opening a spreadsheet today and finding Q3 revenue down 5%. Also, boss has a weird cough. It's strangely humanizing. Reminders that the mathematicians of the stars were also everyday people juggling ordinary worries. The chamber is hot, though, almost oppressive. You can feel sweat beat on your temples as they labor by the fire. Clay dust clings to your nose. The steady scratching of reed styluses against tablets becomes a lullaby, monotonous yet hypnotic. It feels like you're breathing the rhythm of numbers themselves. A young apprentice sneezes, sending a puff of clay dust into the lamplight. His master glares and you almost laugh at the scene. Astronomy's great leap forward, temporarily foiled by allergies. You can't resist the thought that if one sneeze could erase a digit, it might change the fate of an empire's eclipse prediction. Somewhere, future scholars would be puzzling. Why did they suddenly think the moon vanished on a Tuesday? Outside, you hear the muffled beat of a drum. Perhaps another ritual to mark the night's transition. Inside, the calculations continue relentlessly. They're measuring not only lunar cycle, but also planetary wanderings. Mars, Jupiter, Venus, those odd stars that refuse to stay put. The Babylonians tracked them too, noting retrograde loops long before anyone imagined elliptical orbits. To them, each planet had divine personality quirks. Jupiter wasn't just bright, it was Marduk's beacon. Venus wasn't just a wandering light, it was Ishtar's messenger. You watch as one priest pauses, dips his stylus into a small pot of darkened water, and presses a bold wedge deeper into the clay, marking a critical alignment. His hand trembles slightly, not from fatigue, but from reverence. That mark means prophecy, and prophecy means responsibility. A wrong sign could trigger unnecessary fear, or worse, mockery from rival scholars. The lamps sputter. Shadows stretch like long black fingers across the tablets. You notice how they lean over their work to shield the marks, as though protecting a fragile flame? And maybe they are. Every wedge on clay is a fragile link to the heavens, breakable and heavy. Drop one, and you're literally smashing prophecy. You remember how earlier you stood under the blood moon. Here in this chamber, the blood is metaphorical. It's the ink of calculation, the sweat of labor. The eclipse is no longer a terrifying omen. It's a solvable puzzle, and you're watching the puzzle masters at work. One apprentice yawns loudly, earning another sharp look. You smirk, realizing even geniuses can't dodge boredom. Somewhere in this pile of calculations, you suspect there are mistakes, maybe even silly ones. Perhaps one tablet in a museum today is misread because an ancient student nodded off mid-calculation. And now entire scholarly articles are debating a unique Babylonian discovery, when in truth it was just sleep deprivation. Still, you marvel. These rows of wedges are the ancestors of everything from Kepler's laws to your GPS app. Without their dusty numbers, your phone might not even know how to find a satellite. That's a leap across millennia. From clay to code, from lamp soot to LED, it's the same impulse. Track the sky, tame its rhythm, turn it into something useful. The lamps flicker lower. A priest stretches, cracks his knuckles, and places his tablet carefully in a woven basket. Another tucks a damp cloth over the basket to keep the clay from drying too quickly. They rise one by one, their joints stiff, their eyes red. As they shuffle off to rest, you realize you've just witnessed the nightly grind of ancient astronomers. No telescopes, no glossy charts, no software. Just clay, patience, and the kind of discipline you'd need to count sheep for decades. Your own eyes grow heavy. The scraping sound of styluses still echoes in your ears like the tick-tock of a clock that hasn't been invented yet. And you think, if sleep itself were a cycle, these Babylonians would probably have tracked it too. The night outside has cooled, but you're not released yet. You're ushered along with the priest through a narrow passage that smells faintly of old grain and damp brick. At the end, a courtyard opens up, dimly lit by torches. You pause because this space feels different. Less like a study hall, more like a stage. Wooden benches are arranged in a semicircle, and a few officials in embroidered robes settle onto them, adjusting their belts with weary dignity. This is where the numbers turn into prophecy. The tablets prepared upstairs are now unfurled before an audience that expects answers. You notice how one elder clears his throat and launches into a recital. His voice is deep, deliberate, with the cadence of someone reading a legal verdict. He speaks of cycles, the Saros cycle, though he doesn't call it that yet. To him, it's simply the count, 223 lunar months. After that interval, the eclipse pattern repeats. You almost clap in appreciation, except clapping hasn't been invented as polite audience behavior here. Here's your mainstream fact for this section. The Babylonians truly were the first to identify this repeating cycle, allowing them to forecast lunar and solar eclipses with uncanny accuracy. That fact alone is enough to cement them as cosmic accountants of the highest order. The priests gesture to the sky above as if unveiling a grand tapestry. Some officials nod solemnly. Others look bored, like you might if someone explained the same weather forecast for the 100th time. You see one scribe fidgeting with his stylus, doodling a little fish in the margin of his waxboard. Even in solemn prophecy sessions, someone's always sketching. But here's a quirk. Sometimes these predictions came packaged with recommendations on politics or agriculture. Imagine your local weather report ending with, "Also, you should probably postpone invading your neighbor this week." That's essentially what's happening here. A lunar eclipse isn't just a shadow, it's a strategic memo from the cosmos. And historians still argue whether these eclipse forecasts were truly scientific or still veiled in ritual. Were they cold calculations presented with theatrical flair, or were they genuinely believed to be divine whispers? The evidence points both ways. A few tablets read like raw math, columns of cycles, no embellishment. Others are smothered in prayers, omens, and sacrifices. Maybe both coexisted, depending on the audience. Tonight, the performance is part theater, part boardroom meeting. The high priest raises a hand and describes how a future eclipse will darken the sun during the reign of the current king. His words hang heavy. You realize the crowd isn't gasping at the astronomy. They're gasping at the politics. An eclipse could signal divine disapproval, and divine disapproval could topple thrones. This isn't stargazing, this is statecraft. One official leans close to another, whispering too loudly. You catch the words land tax and harvest, and wonder if they're even paying attention to the cosmic lecture. Maybe they're just waiting to know whether this month's eclipse means good crops or bad omens. The rest is white noise. Another priest unfurls a long strip of cloth with painted constellations. It's crude, the stars drawn as neat dots with faint lines connecting them. You lean in and realize it's a teaching aid, a PowerPoint slide 4,000 years early. He traces the cloth with a finger, showing how the moon will pass through this cluster or that one. The audience watches politely. One child yawns. At that moment, you picture yourself standing in a modern lecture hall, fighting sleep during a professor's monotone. Some things never change. The human struggle against drowsiness in the face of detail is as old as civilization. And yet, as the presentation drones on, you feel the rhythm of the sorrow cycle sinking into you. 223 lunar months. That's about 18 years. A long stretch for one person, but short enough for 3 generations to track. You imagine scribes passing the knowledge like a torch, grandfather to father to son, until it's solid enough to engrave into collective memory. Another tidbit floats in. Some records suggest they knew eclipses were more likely when the moon was near certain nodes, invisible crossing points of its orbit. They didn't describe it in today's terms, but their awareness was eerily close to what later Greek astronomers would refine. It's as if they could smell geometry in the sky, even if they couldn't see it. The torches crackle. One priest pauses to drink from a clay cup. You hear the faint slosh and wish someone had brought snacks. Imagine trying to sit through an eclipse forecast with nothing but flat beer and stale bread. Maybe that's why the priests lace their recitals with drama. If you can't serve popcorn, serve omens. Eventually, the elder draws to a close, rolling up his cloth and pressing his hand to his chest in ritual salute. The audience murmurs polite approval. Some shuffle away, already thinking about the next tax levy or shipment of barley. Others linger, faces tight with unease, as though a shadow months in the future has already cast itself across their hearts. You realize you've just witnessed one of the earliest forms of predictive science being treated like political theater. It's both inspiring and faintly absurd. Somewhere in your mind, you picture a modern press conference with NASA scientists standing stiffly at a podium. Except here the slides are painted cloth, and the reporters are worried about whether their goats will still give milk after the moon goes dark. The courtyard empties, the torches burn low, and you remain standing, feeling the cycle echo in your mind. 223 moons, repeating like a lullaby disguised as mathematics. You almost want to start counting yourself, but the numbers are too heavy for your drowsy head. Instead, you breathe out slowly, as if you too are part of the cycle, waxing and waning with the rhythm of time. The courtyard has gone quiet, but the city never really sleeps. You wander through the narrow alleys of Babylon, and above you, the Milky Way sprawls faintly across the haze. Your feet crunch on dust. The night air is thick with smoke from hearths still glowing. In the distance, dogs bark, a baby wails, and the hum of life refuses to die down. Yet you're not drawn to the sounds of the earth. You're drawn up, to the river of stars flowing overhead. You tilt your head back, and you notice something new. The sky feels crowded. You remember the priest's warnings about animals hidden among the constellations, lions, scorpions, bulls. But now in your sleep-heavy gaze, they twitch slightly, as if restless. A lion yawns. A scorpion flexes its tail. You rub your eyes, knowing they're just stars, but your mind isn't entirely convinced. Maybe you're as impressionable as those ancient villagers who once swore they saw omens in every flicker. Here's your mainstream fact. Many Babylonian constellations became the backbone of the zodiac we still use today. The scorpion of Scorpio, the bull of Taurus, even the twins of Gemini, all seated in these very skies you're staring at now. It's not astrology yet, but the raw framework is already there, inked onto tablets and whispered over market stalls. The air feels heavier. You lean against a mud brick wall, and your thoughts soften. Not quite asleep, not quite awake. This is when the quirks creep in. Did you know some Babylonian texts describe constellations as not just patterns, but as doorways? Imagine that. The night sky as an enormous apartment complex. Each animal shape a door, and behind each door, gods, ancestors, or something stranger. You picture a cosmic janitor unlocking them with a giant key ring, muttering about rent overdue in the constellation of the goatfish. Historians still argue whether these doorway descriptions were literal belief or metaphor. Were people truly convinced stars opened into other realms? Or was it a poetic shorthand for saying, this is where the divine shows up? Either way, you can't shake the thought of knocking politely on a star and waiting for some glowing figure to peek out, annoyed that you interrupted their cosmic dinner. You drift farther down the alley, past shuttered stalls and abandoned baskets. The walls are painted faintly with symbols, traces of chalk or ash from some earlier ritual. A faint smell of incense lingers, mixed with the sour tang of last night's beer. You pass a sleeping goat, tethered to a post, its ears twitching. Even the goat seems to feel the pull of the stars above. You imagine villagers standing right here centuries ago, pointing upward and whispering, "See that shadow in the Milky Way? That's the drinking llama." Yes, another quirk. The cosmic llama that bends its head to drink from the galactic river. The image is absurd, like a farm animal in zero gravity, slurping starlight through a cosmic straw. And yet, for a culture built on agriculture, it makes a strange kind of sense. What better guardian of rain and fertility than a galactic llama with an unquenchable thirst? You laugh quietly, though your laughter fades into a yawn. The air is warm, your eyelids heavier. You realize that myths don't have to make sense to be comforting. Sometimes absurdity is more soothing than logic. A cosmic llama feels more alive than an app on your phone forecasting partly cloudy. Above, the stars dim ever so slightly. The scorpion relaxes, the bull lowers its head, the serpent coils into a tighter knot. Even the imagined ancestors seem to shuffle off to bed. The whole sky is tucking itself in, and you're invited to do the same. You feel your body grow weightless, as though the street beneath you has dissolved, leaving only the Milky Way as your mattress. But the scholars keep intruding into your thoughts. Some claim the Babylonians' constellations were rigid. Each star had a set place, each pattern locked. Others argue they shifted constantly, stories reimagined with each retelling. You wonder if someone once argued over whether the stars formed a goat or a dog, the way we argue today about whether a viral photo shows a dress is blue or gold. Humans never change, only the props do. You close your eyes for a moment and the debate fades. All you feel is the slow pulse of the galactic river. Your breath aligns with it. Inhale, the stars brighten. Exhale, they dim. The rhythm rocks you as if you're floating not in air, but in a cradle suspended from the heavens. When you open your eyes again, the alley has blurred. The stars above glow softer, like tired fireflies. A hush spreads over the city, as though every living thing has agreed to rest at once. Even the goats, even the scorpions in their burrows, even the anxious priests with their charts. You let yourself sink into that quiet, realizing you've slipped from history into something timeless. Just you, the night, and the cosmic river flowing endlessly. And that's the comfort, isn't it? The thought that the same constellations staring down at you have stared down at every human before you. Kings, scribes, farmers, children, each looking up and weaving their own meanings. The myths don't matter as much as the shared act of looking. You're part of that same chain now, one more tired figure beneath the endless watch of the stars. The air has thinned to the kind of stillness that feels alive, as though silence itself is breathing with you. You've wandered out of the city now, or at least your mind has. You find yourself lying on a stretch of cool earth, no walls around you, just the blackness of the night pressing in from every side. The Milky Way spreads above like a pale ribbon, softer now, the brightness drained away into a more subdued glow. It feels like someone dimmed the cosmic lanterns, careful not to wake the sleepers below. Your body is heavy, and yet your thoughts float. You let them drift as easily as a reed on the river. The llama you imagined earlier stretches out across the sky, but it isn't chewing, isn't grazing, it's lying down, its shape blurred and patient. The fox curls its tail like a watchful pet. The serpent, once restless, is coiled loosely, no longer a threat but a companion. And the ancestors, those ghosts you half believed might lean down through doorways of starlight, have gone quiet too. Everyone seems to be sleeping now, even the cosmos. Here's a grounded fact. For the Babylonians, the Milky Way was sometimes described as the path of the gods, the great road along which divine figures traveled between heavens and earth. It wasn't just scenery, it was traffic, a thoroughfare, a kind of celestial highway. You can almost imagine a caravan trundling across it, oxen pulling carts loaded with sacred cargo, a few gods arguing over directions. The quirky detail you can't shake is this. Some myths describe spirits wandering that road, unhurried like tired travelers at a roadside inn. You picture a group of ghosts leaning against a galactic tavern wall, sipping starlight like weak ale, waiting for a ride back down to Earth. One waves politely at you, yawns, and then fades into the dust. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians saw the Milky Way consistently as a road, or whether that was just one of many interpretations. Was it always divine? Was it sometimes agricultural, tied to rivers below? Or was it like the world's first Rorschach test, with each city-state squinting up and seeing something different? The debate lingers, unresolved, much like the shimmer of the stars themselves. But as you lie here, you're no longer interested in arguments. The scholars can keep their clay tablets and their footnotes. You just feel the quiet rhythm of breath, the way the earth itself seems to pulse beneath your spine. The ground is firm but forgiving, like a mattress woven from centuries. The night presses a cool hand on your forehead, smoothing away every crease of thought. Your eyelids droop. The Milky Way itself seems to tuck you in, drawing its curtains of faint shadow at the edges. The darkness is not frightening, it's tender, the way a parent lowers the lamp at bedtime. It folds in slowly, not abrupt, not sharp, just a gradual softening of edges, until even your own outline feels blurred. You take another slow breath, and it's as though the air has weight, a gentle quilt settling across your chest. The myths recede into whispers. The animals drift into slumber. The ancestors close their doors of light. You remain, but softer now, as if even you are a story being told more quietly. And maybe that's the truth you've stumbled on here. The universe isn't waiting for you to solve it. It isn't a puzzle with missing pieces or a task demanding a deadline. It's a lullaby that has been playing since the first humans looked up. A song that doesn't stop when you fall asleep. It keeps humming, steady, patient, eternal. You're carried on that hum, gently rocked along the galactic river. You don't need to swim. You don't need to steer. You are part of the flow now, your breath in rhythm with the starlight, your body sinking, your mind loosening. There's no finish line to chase, no destination to stress over, just the long, slow drift of dust and dreams. The llama stands guard, the fox curls tighter, the serpent rests, the ancestors watch in silence, and you, tucked into their company, let go fully at last. You tilt your head and the Milky Way seems like a gauzy bridge connecting mountaintops, its pale river broken by knots of ink. In those gaps, the Inca saw animals, not shining outlines like the constellations of Greece, but the negative space itself, creatures carved out of darkness. Imagine that. Instead of drawing with stars, you're sketching with shadow. You breathe the thin air dry, and you notice how the whole band of light has its own rhythm, a slow current like a river you could almost step into. Your mind drifts, picturing ancient Inca villagers gathering at night, pointing upward. They didn't say, "Oh, look, Orion's belt." They leaned closer, whispering, "Do you see the llama?" That's right. One of the first shapes they picked out was a celestial llama, stretching along the coal sack dark of the Milky Way. The same animal that carried burdens up the steep paths now carried meaning in the sky. You almost laugh at how fitting that is. When in doubt, make the universe look like your livestock. And yet there's an elegance in that practicality. Historians note that Inca astronomy was woven into survival, not idle stargazing. The stars told them when to plant potatoes, when to harvest maize, when the rains would come tumbling down from cloud-wrapped peaks. Even the Milky Way itself, called Mayu, the river, was tied to earthly rivers. You see how the reflection of one mirrored the other, as though heaven and earth were twins. A quirky tidbit floats up. Spanish chroniclers once mocked the idea that people could see llamas in the sky. They compared it to spotting rabbits in the moon's face, except they couldn't help but sound slightly jealous. After all, the Inca's llamas weren't random doodles. They were embedded in ritual, in meaning, in calendar systems. And here you are, centuries later, staring at the same shadows, trying to unsee what's been imagined for millennia. Good luck with that. As you gaze longer, you realize the Milky Way looks less like a neat band of stars and more like a ragged tapestry. Some scholars still argue whether the Inca focused primarily on dark constellations or also acknowledged bright star patterns. The debates go back and forth, dusty papers piling up like forgotten coca leaves, but the shadows always come back into focus. They mattered most. The air chills, but you feel warmed by the thought that these people lived and breathed their night sky. Imagine a child tugging at a parent's sleeve saying, "There, look, the llama's head." The adult nods, not dismissing it as childish, but weaving it into lessons of water, harvest, and time. You've probably had that moment with clouds and daylight, seeing dragons and castles. The Inca just did it bigger, bolder, and made it cosmic law. Your senses deepen. The sound of night insects blends with silence, and the Milky Way above becomes almost too much. Like someone left a lantern burning over the Andes. You feel how small you are, and yet the stories make you bigger, folded into something that connects past and present. You're not alone. You're standing in the footprints of countless dreamers who tilted their necks the same way. The slow sweep of dust and stars across the horizon reminds you of how time bends here. Unlike city nights, there's no light pollution to dilute the spectacle, just unbroken black, pin-pricked with brilliance, and those dark gaps sculpting themselves into llamas, foxes, serpents. You chuckle softly at how easy it is to start believing them yourself. Once someone points it out, your brain just fills in the rest. Kind of like one of those old magic eye posters where suddenly a dolphin jumps out and you can't unsee it. And maybe that's the secret. Once you learn to see the universe through another culture's lens, you can't just go back to blank staring. You're marked by it, shaped by the stories. Tonight, you carry their llamas in your own gaze, whether you want to or not. And strangely enough, it feels right. The longer you let your eyes linger on that dark llama stitched across the Milky Way, the more you realize it's not just a story, it's a system. The Inca didn't divide sky and earth into separate boxes. They braided them together like a rope spun from llama wool. You breathe in the thin air and almost taste the dust, as if you're inhaling the same stuff that once fed myths and calendars alike. Down below, rivers snake through valleys, carrying snowmelt from glaciers. Up above, the Milky Way mirrors them perfectly, a heavenly waterway flowing through stars. You start to get why they called it Mayu. It wasn't just a name, it was a reflection. Imagine walking through Cusco centuries ago, before Spanish bells drowned out the native songs. The city itself was designed as a sacred map, temples and streets aligned with sky markers. The Temple of the Sun, Coricancha, was not just a building, but a pivot point where sky and earth exchanged secrets. From there, astronomer priests traced sight lines to mountaintops and constellations, timing rituals to the seasonal rise of dark shapes. You picture them lifting coca leaf offerings, muttering chants, their breath white in the chill. And there you are, a time traveler in sandals, trying to keep up without spilling your imaginary chicha beer. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. Chroniclers like Bernabe Cobo recorded that the Inca marked their calendar through solstices and equinoxes, but also by the rising of dark constellations. That's right, not just Orion or Sirius, but llamas and serpents made of shadow-guided festivals. When the celestial llama tilted into view, it signaled seasonal rains. Pretty handy if you depended on crops balanced on precarious terraces. You nod, realizing it's less about myth, more about survival disguised in story. A quirky tidbit dances at the edge of your thoughts. Some anthropologists claim that when the dark llama constellation dipped lower in the sky, villagers poured actual llama blood into the earth as a ritual offering. Imagine being the unlucky llama at that ceremony. Sorry, buddy, but your sky twin showed up tonight. You shake your head and smirk, half horrified, half impressed at the cosmic commitment. Meanwhile, debates still simmer among scholars. Some argue whether these rituals were tightly linked to agriculture or leaned heavier into spiritual symbolism. Did farmers really wait for the llama's shadowy body to appear before planting? Or was it more about affirming cosmic order? Historians still argue whether practicality or poetry carried more weight in those mountaintop decisions. As you picture all this, you find yourself drifting into the role of an Inca farmer. You stand in a field, chin tipped toward the night. Your back aches from hoeing, but the stars are your almanac. You're not flipping through a book. You're literally watching time unfold in the sky. A cluster shifts, a dark patch rises, and you know whether the rains are late or early. There's a comfort in that. The universe is vast, but it's also a clock, and you've learned to read it. The night deepens, and you sense how the Inca saw layers in everything. A river on Earth wasn't just a river. It was the twin of Mayu. A llama wasn't just a pack animal. It was written in the heavens. Even Cusco itself was mapped in the shape of a puma, tying city streets to celestial bodies. You grin at the sheer audacity of it. Urban planning meets cosmic cosplay. You picture a procession winding through those streets, torches bobbing, drums pounding low. The people stop to look up. Some point to the Milky Way, tracing the dark shapes. Others whisper stories about llamas drinking from celestial streams. The children squint, trying to see it, and once they do, the llama locks into their minds forever. You know that feeling. You've stared at clouds until a dragon snapped into focus, and then you couldn't unsee it. Multiply that by generations, and you've got a cosmic tradition baked into daily life. The more you think about it, the more you realize how different this system is from, say, Greek constellations. Those were drawn with bright points like connect the dots puzzles. The Inca flipped it. They looked at the spaces in between, the gaps, the voids. It's almost philosophical, isn't it? Seeing meaning not in what shines, but in what's missing. You can't help but chuckle. It's like the universe itself was playing negative space art centuries before graphic designers thought they invented it. You shift your weight, stretching as though you've been standing too long on that ridge. The Milky Way arches overhead, and you imagine llamas grazing along its riverbanks, their shadowy forms eternal, patient, and slightly smug. Maybe that's why the Inca wove them into stories of rain and fertility. Because what better cosmic accountant than a llama? Always steady, always chewing, always there. The night continues its slow crawl, and you feel folded into the rhythm. Above, the dark llama lingers. Below, the rivers mirror the celestial path. The connection is complete. You're caught in the braid, woven between soil and sky, breath and myth, farmer and priest. It's not just about seeing a shape, it's about living in sync with it, about letting the universe tell you when to plant, when to rest, when to celebrate. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you admit it. The Inca had something profound here. The darkness itself can be a guide. The spaces in between hold the truth. And for once, staring at shadows feels less like mystery and more like coming home. The Milky Way keeps stretching across the sky, and you trail along with it like a traveler walking beside a river. The current is invisible, but you feel it tugging, whispering that there are more animals lurking in those dark patches, whole herds grazing in shadows that spill across the galaxy. The llama isn't alone up there. If you tilt your imagination just a little further, you'll notice a fox tucked into the gloom, a toad squatting near the river, even a serpent coiling its body along the starry waterway. It's a celestial zoo, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Inca treated those animals like cosmic neighbors, each one tied to earthly counterparts. That fox? It was a trickster, sometimes blamed for causing mischief in villages. The toad croaking along the Milky Way's edge? It signaled rain's coming, just like its noisy cousins near marshes. The serpent? A symbol of both wisdom and danger, winding its way between worlds. You imagine yourself on a mountaintop, pointing to the sky and whispering, "That fox up there stole my dinner," while villagers nod knowingly. Myth and reality blurred seamlessly. The night sky wasn't just decoration, it was a mirror of daily life. Here's a mainstream historical fact worth planting in your memory. Spanish chroniclers noted that the Inca's constellations weren't arbitrary. They directly influenced agriculture and ritual. Farmers watched the rise of these shadowy animals to time their planting and harvest. The dark fox appearing meant it was time to guard your guinea pigs and llamas more carefully. Celestial predators implied earthly ones would stir. The night sky was essentially a cosmic farmer's almanac. And unlike the glossy magazines at your local feed store, this one didn't expire every January. Now for a quirky tidbit, some oral traditions suggest that villagers believed llamas could drink from the Milky Way itself. Yep, thirsty cosmic llamas, bending down like divine giraffes, slurping star water straight from the galactic river. You grin at the thought, careful, don't let them finish the whole thing, or we'll all dry up. It's both absurd and poetic, the kind of belief that makes you laugh while secretly admiring its logic. After all, if water fell from the sky as rain, why not imagine animals drinking up there to keep the cycle balanced? Of course, historians still argue whether these stories were tightly organized by a priestly elite or simply sprouted from scattered villages, interpreting the night in their own way. Was there a single canon of Inca constellations? Or was it more like a patchwork quilt, with each community stitching its own animals into the darkness? The debate hangs unresolved, like a half-told myth waiting for someone to finish the ending. You lean back and smirk. Either way, the llama's not going anywhere. You picture villagers lying on rooftops at night, wrapped in woven blankets, pointing upward as children trace shapes with stubby fingers. The dark toad looms, the serpent wriggles, and the llama takes center stage, calm and hulking in the sky. Kids giggle, daring each other to spot the fox, while elders nod solemnly, reminding everyone of the sacred rhythms those animals signal. You remember doing the same thing with clouds as a child. Dragons, ships, giant ice cream cones. And suddenly the Inca feel less foreign, more like distant cousins who happen to have a sharper sense of cosmic timing. The Milky Way flows on, and you imagine how these animal shapes weren't static. They move with the seasons, rising and tilting, fading and returning. Each shift carried meaning, like turning the pages of a slow, starry book. When the serpent dipped below the horizon, it meant danger had passed. When the toad rose again, rains were on the way. You smile, thinking the sky doubled as both a bedtime storybook and a weather app. Only difference: no annoying ads asking you to upgrade for premium forecasts. As the night deepens, you let yourself walk further into this cosmic zoo. You're surrounded by creatures, but they're shadows, silent and enormous, stitched into the Milky Way. You reach out a hand as if you could pet the dark llama's flank, but your fingers only brush the cool mountain air. The silence is soothing. These animals don't roar or croak. They just hang there, patient, watching, reminding you of cycles that outlast generations. And in that patience, you feel something settle in your chest. The constellations aren't just decoration, they're conversation. They told the Inca when to plant, when to sacrifice, when to celebrate. They still tell you something now if you're willing to listen, that even in silence, patterns hold meaning, and shadows can be guides as much as lights. Your eyelids droop heavier, your breath slows to match the Milky Way's flow. Around you, the cosmic llama and its companions graze, drink, and coil in eternal rhythm. The sky feels less like a ceiling and more like a field, vast, alive, and strangely familiar. And you, a tiny observer wrapped in stardust, are part of its herd. You drift onward, following that galactic herd as if you're the shepherd of shadows. The llama stays near, but now other figures begin to crowd closer. The fox darts along the Milky Way's edge, the serpent slithers back into sight, and the toad squats heavy in the gloom. You feel as if you've wandered into a village fair where every animal has gathered. Only this one stretches across the entire sky. The air seems thinner, colder, yet strangely alive with quiet expectancy. The Inca didn't just watch these animals. They spoke with them, offered them rituals, asked for guidance. Imagine standing on a stone terrace in Cusco, priests lifting coca leaves to the sky, murmuring prayers toward the shadowy llama above. Farmers gathered at the plaza, waiting for the sign that rains would come, that crops would grow. These celestial animals weren't mere decoration. They were woven into ceremonies, their shadows carrying as much authority as the sun itself. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground you. The Inca constructed entire observatories, like the site at Machu Picchu, aligning windows and stones with the Milky Way. When the shadow of the llama crossed a certain point, it wasn't just symbolic. It triggered real festivals and agricultural work. The heavens functioned like a clock, and the llama was one of its hands. You can almost hear the quiet gasps of villagers when the moment arrived, the whispering certainty that the cosmos had nodded its head in approval. But here comes the quirky tidbit you'll enjoy. Some folklore hints that llamas weren't just up there grazing, they occasionally descended. Yes, celestial llamas galloping down invisible star ramps, shaking loose showers of milk that became rain. Picture it, giant galactic livestock prancing through the atmosphere like kids sliding down a playground slide, leaving puddles behind. You can't help but chuckle at the absurdity, though it fits with a worldview where the everyday and the cosmic were tightly braided together. Rain wasn't just meteorology, it was livestock maintenance. Historians still argue whether these descent myths were widespread or localized. Did every Andean community believe in cosmic llamas pouring rain? Or was it a quirky invention of one highland valley? The debate remains foggy, with fragments of oral tradition hinting in both directions. Scholars squabble in journals while the Milky Way silently shines. Unbothered, llamas are not. You smirk, imagining the sky leaning down to say, "Believe what you want, I'll still keep glowing." The village below you feels alive as you drift lower. Picture musicians with pan flutes and drums, playing songs that echo into the mountain air, their melodies directed toward the stars. Children chase one another, pretending to be foxes or llamas, while elders sit cross-legged, chewing coca leaves, eyes fixed on the heavens. Priests adjust their robes, tilting their heads to check the sky's timing, aligning human ritual with celestial rhythm. It's less a festival and more a cosmic appointment kept faithfully, generation after generation. You walk further through this imagined scene, and the music softens into your own breathing. The dark animals overhead glow faintly, their edges shimmering as if illuminated from within. The llama's gaze feels steady, the fox mischievous, the serpent poised to strike, the toad crouched with quiet power. They are archetypes, eternal characters in a play that repeats with every season. You sense their presence more than see them, like old friends you recognize in a crowded room. The rituals intensify in your imagination. Priests pour chicha beer into carved stone channels, offerings for the animals above. Families scatter grains on the ground, mirroring stars scattered in the sky. Fires flicker, sending smoke upward, as if to draw a ladder for the llama to descend. You think of how deeply the Inca merged practical survival with spiritual symbolism, and how strangely comforting that is. No split between the sacred and the ordinary. And maybe, just maybe, you imagine yourself as part of it. Standing there in a rough wool tunic, raising your hands to the sky, whispering thanks for the rain that hasn't come yet but will. You feel the rhythm of drums against your ribs, the flute's high note threading with your breath, the glow of fire warming your cheeks as stars shimmer above. The llama listens, the fox listens, the serpent coils tighter, the toad waits, the night deepens, and the villagers drift to sleep. Fires burn low. The plaza empties until only the animals in the sky remain awake, holding their eternal vigil. You lie down with them, wrapped in the chill of the Andes, breathing with the Milky Way itself. The llama stands guard, its shadow stretching across the galaxy like a blanket. And in that quiet, you feel the strange safety of being watched over by cosmic animals, companions who never truly leave, no matter how many centuries slip past. The sky doesn't quiet. If anything, it seems louder now, though not with sound. It's as if the stars hum in a way your bones can hear, a low vibration that thrums through your chest. You keep drifting, weightless, and the Milky Way sprawls like a silver river beneath you. The llama and fox fade a little, their outlines blurring into the dark. Another shape tugs your attention, a broad, shadowy smear that Inca storytellers once described as the resting place of souls. You float closer, and the air feels heavy, as though history itself is leaning against you. Here's the straightforward fact that locks this moment in reality. For the Inca, the Milky Way wasn't just scenery. It was literally the Mayu, the great celestial river, tied to the Urubamba River winding below in Peru. They believed what flowed in the heavens flowed on earth, that the sky and land mirrored each other like twin paintings. Farmers, priests, warriors, all of them lived beneath that reflection, watching to see what the river above might reveal. But now the quirky twist. Not every shadow was an animal. Some were imagined as doorways, and one of those, villagers whispered, was a threshold where ancestors slipped in and out. The Milky Way for them wasn't silent. It was crowded, a cosmic traffic jam of spirits, llamas, foxes, and maybe even gods who didn't mind a midnight stroll. You picture a ghost llama brushing past you politely, muttering, "Excuse me, big night, lots of rain to deliver," before vanishing into starlight. You can't help but grin at the absurd picture. Historians still argue whether this belief in thresholds was truly Inca-wide, or whether later chroniclers overinterpreted a few isolated myths. Some scholars say the Inca had a highly ordered cosmology where every shadow had a fixed meaning, while others suggest local villages improvised stories as they pleased. The debate remains open, like one of those cosmic doorways, unresolved, a little mysterious, and waiting for someone bold enough to step through. You drift downward again, closer to the mountains. The stone terraces glisten faintly, moonlight kissing the fields. You picture tired farmers, hands rough from work, tilting their heads skyward to confirm the signs. Will the rains come soon? Has the llama moved? Has the celestial river swelled? For them, astronomy wasn't an abstract science. It was crop insurance. Plant too early or too late, and you risk famine. Watch the sky correctly, and your family eats. No wonder llamas in the stars mattered more than our sleek telescopes today. There's comfort in that thought, oddly enough. You live in a world where apps forecast the weather and satellites measure rainfall, yet those don't make the waiting any easier. The Inca had shadows to consult, and perhaps that felt more personal, more alive. A llama in the sky has eyes, a satellite does not. One watches, the other only calculates. You wonder if maybe the Inca felt less alone in their struggle against the elements. The night thickens, and you imagine a festival's end. Fires still glow faintly, children now curled up against their mothers, elders snoring softly on wool blankets. The plaza is hushed, but the sky is far from empty. A breeze moves across your cheek, carrying the faint scent of smoke and roasted maize, mixing strangely with the cool bite of the mountain air. And above, the llama holds its position, as steady as a watchman on a midnight shift. Somewhere in the silence, you almost hear a flute again. One high, wavering note, as if a ghost musician refuses to pack up his instrument. The sound trails off, leaving only the pulse of your own breathing. You float with it, in rhythm with the cosmic river. Each inhale seems to carry starlight, each exhale a soft surrender. And then the shadows seem to ripple. The llama flickers, the fox blinks, the serpent uncoils slightly. You know they're just dark patches against a brighter backdrop, yet your sleepy mind insists they're alive, shifting, maybe even reacting to you. For a moment you wonder what they see when they look down. Do they notice you drifting along, a curious visitor caught between history and dream? Or are you just another flicker in their endless watch, like a campfire spark in the valley below? The stars lean closer, almost conspiratorial. You recall how the Inca linked these patterns not only to animals and crops, but to cycles of life itself. Birth, death, renewal, all written across that glowing river. You let that thought settle, heavy but soothing, like a thick blanket on a cold night. There's no rush, no deadline, only the long drift of shadows that will outlast every single one of us. And perhaps that's the comfort. You're floating inside a story that doesn't end. The llama will graze the sky long after you're gone. The fox will keep prowling. The serpent will keep coiling. Farmers will come and go. Scholars will bicker. Festivals will burn out. And still the Milky Way will hum its slow, eternal song. You let the weight of that press against you. Not frightening, but steady, like a reminder that the universe isn't waiting for you to finish your to-do list. It just keeps moving. The shadows fade a little, softening into a diffuse glow. Your body feels heavier, slower, as though the galactic river is gently setting you down on some invisible shore. You're not quite sure where, but it doesn't matter. The air is cool, your eyes heavy, the hum of the cosmos still steady in your ribs. And all around you, the dark shapes linger, silent companions in the night. The river carries you deeper, not with splashes or currents, but with a soft, unbroken drift. The Milky Way stretches wider now, its pale glow flattening into something almost like a floor beneath you. You feel yourself gliding across it, a traveler without a boat, a dreamer without an anchor. The stars dim around the edges, as if they know your eyelids are heavier, and they're politely lowering the volume. The Inca once said this cosmic river connected everything, mountains to valleys, heavens to earth, people to animals. If water is life on the ground, then starlight was its mirror above. Farmers traced both, priests measured both, kings consulted both. And though we can scoff now, with apps and charts and satellites, there's something strangely satisfying about their version, where clouds of dust became llamas, foxes, serpents, even condors, each creature holding a meaning, a warning, a whisper from the cosmos. But here's the quirk that sneaks in. Those same llamas weren't just symbols of rain and fertility. Some tales claim they could actually drink from the Milky Way. Imagine that, a giant, shadowy llama leaning its head down like a straw into the galactic river. You picture the absurdity, and yet it fits. Who else but a cosmic llama would slurp starlight as casually as water from a trough? You can't help but chuckle softly, the sound lost in the endless hum around you. Still, scholars debate whether these images were consistent across the empire. Did every village see the same llama? Did every priest agree on the same fox? Or were the constellations as fluid as stories told by the fire, shifting slightly with each retelling? Historians still argue whether the Inca cosmology was a rigid doctrine or a living conversation. And perhaps that's the secret. Both are true. The sky, like all good myths, is flexible enough to carry contradictions. You drift farther, past shadow animals you don't even recognize. Outlines that may once have been familiar to Inca eyes but are now only ink blots to yours. They blur, fade, reform. Your body feels weightless, but your thoughts are softening, dissolving like sugar in warm tea. The questions, what's real, what's legend, what's debate, slip away. What matters is the slow pulse of the galactic river, steady and eternal. The night grows quieter still, the stars dim further, no longer blazing, but glowing faintly, like fireflies tired from dancing. You can almost feel them tuck themselves in, one by one. The llama lies down. The fox curls its tail. The serpent coils into a loose knot. Even the ancestors you imagined earlier seem to sigh, settling into their own dreamlike stillness. And you're invited into that stillness, welcomed without condition. You let the last of your breath ease out, slow and patient. The cosmic river cushions you, not cold but gently warm, as if it holds all the comfort of a blanket and all the weightlessness of drifting in space. You don't need to hold on anymore. You don't need to chase answers or argue myths. You're already inside the story, folded in, drifting with it, part of the same glow. The Milky Way fades around the edges as though drawing curtains. The darkness isn't sharp or scary. It's soft, tender, almost velvety. It reminds you of someone dimming a lamp at your bedside, careful not to wake you, careful to make sure the quiet is kind. And as that darkness deepens, your body relaxes, every muscle unwinding. The myths recede, the animals rest, the scholars go silent. Only you remain, nestled in the vastness, safe and still. You are drifting, you are resting, you are part of something immeasurably wide and immeasurably gentle. The cosmic river doesn't end. It simply carries you onward, slower, quieter, deeper. You let yourself go with it, eyes closed, mind quiet. And as the dust continues its timeless journey, you're carried along too, into the softest dark. The sand beneath you is still warm from the day's heat, but the air is cooling fast. The Nile, though you can't see it in the dark, is not far away. Its waters heavy with silt, carrying the weight of life itself for everyone in this land. But tonight, your eyes are not on the river. They're on the sky, waiting for Sirius to climb. Egyptians called it Sopdet, and they gave it a goddess's form, star crown, flowing dress, sometimes even a bundle of wheat in her hand. It wasn't just that bright dot. It was a celestial woman whispering, "The flood is coming. Get ready." You imagine the villagers, barefoot in linen kilts, standing in courtyards, heads tilted back, whispering to one another, "Do you see it yet? Is she rising?" Because Sirius is heliacal rising, that first reappearance just before dawn after months of absence, lined up eerily well with the Nile's annual flooding. That wasn't coincidence to them. That was divine scheduling. And honestly, if you had to live in a place where your entire year's harvest, Your entire family's survival depended on when a river decided to swell, you'd cling to the night sky like it was your personal Google Calendar. Except here, the notifications are faint lights on the horizon, and instead of a buzz on your phone, you get a collective gasp from your neighbors. The Egyptians treated Sirius's rising almost like New Year's Eve, except no ball drop, no champagne, no awkward small talk with your uncle about crypto. Instead, temples across Egypt would perform rituals. Priests would mark the star's position carefully on their star clocks. In Thebes or Memphis, in tiny farming hamlets or along bustling trade routes, all eyes turned east. And when Sirius broke the horizon, it was the cosmic drumbeat announcing, "Floods inbound." Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient accounts say people believe Sirius could actually cause the Nile flood. Like the star had a straw dipped into the heavens, pouring water down from the sky into the river. Imagine that, one little dot above, secretly working like a faucet. Not scientifically correct, but oddly charming. You can almost picture Sopdet leaning over a giant amphora jar, tipping it just so, making sure Egypt didn't shrivel up into a dust bowl. Historians still argue whether everyone across Egypt saw Sirius the same way. Was Sopdet universally adored, or did villages far from temples shrug and say, "It's just a star, mate"? Some think urban centers with their priests and astronomical gear formalize Sirius worship, while country folk just noticed, "Hey, it floods when that shiny one comes back." Either way, the timing was too precise to ignore. The desert night is filled with layers of sound. A dog barking somewhere near the village edge, the soft scrape of sandals as late workers hurry home, and, if you imagine hard enough, the hushed chanting of priests atop flat temple roofs. They wore crisp, white linen, shaved heads gleaming in starlight, and they would lift their hands towards Sirius as though greeting an old friend. You lie there, blinking up at the blue-white glow, and for a moment you feel the same anticipation that farmers and kings must have felt 4,000 years ago. You can even picture a scribe, hunched by a flickering oil lamp, scratching notes onto a potsherd. "Sopdet has risen. Prepare the banks." He yawns, dips his reed pen again, maybe wonders if he'll get extra rations for being the first to notice. Small human details slip through the cracks of history like this. You know the priests weren't all solemn all the time. Someone had to trip on the temple stairs. Someone had to joke, "Well, if she doesn't rise tomorrow, guess we're doomed." Nervous laughter, probably. Meanwhile, the ordinary people, who didn't read or write, probably learned Sirius lore through stories, myths, or festivals. Mothers pointing the star out to their children, farmers teaching their sons. When you see Sopdet there, by the horizon, it's time to sharpen the plows. Knowledge passed like lullabies, folded into everyday life. And isn't that the secret charm? For you, Sirius is just a bright point you might notice once or twice if you bother to look up. For them, it was the clock that ran their world. It didn't just shine, it promised survival. When the star rose, so did their hopes, their prayers, their certainty that life would continue another year. The Nile, unseen in the dark, is already swelling in your imagination. You can smell damp reeds, hear frogs croaking, sense the heaviness of water creeping onto the banks. And above it all, Sirius burns steady, like a divine lantern. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again, almost surprised it's still there. Blue, cold, insistent. The desert wind has shifted cooler now, brushing your arms like the soft whisper of linen. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance. Your eyelids are heavy, but the star keeps calling you awake, as if to say, "This moment matters, stay with it." And you do. You float with the Egyptians, caught between fear and awe, learning to trust a star as though it were a neighbor dropping by with good news. The horizon fades, stars wheel slowly overhead, and Sirius begins its slow climb higher, leaving you with the sense that time itself just moved forward. One small shimmer, one annual promise, one light that tied a whole civilization's heartbeat to the cosmos. The night rolls into dawn, and you're still lying there on the warm sand, eyelids heavy but refusing to shut. Sirius hovers near the horizon, fading a little as the first threads of sunlight unravel across the sky. In ancient Egypt, this exact moment, the heliacal rising, wasn't just a spectacle, it was a cosmic green light. You imagine the entire landscape bracing for what comes next. The Nile, silent in darkness, preparing to heave itself over its banks, dragging with it mud, silt, and a year's worth of survival. You hear the first sounds of morning, the soft bleating of goats, the murmur of women grinding grain on stone querns, and the shuffle of children chasing each other barefoot through dust. All of them are living inside this countdown. Flood season isn't some vague calendar note. It's the event that makes or breaks a year. You feel that tension buzzing, almost like humidity before a storm, except this storm takes the shape of a river stretching out its arms. The Egyptians didn't call it the Nile flood the way we might, casually like a weather report. They gave it a season, Akhet. It meant inundation, and it wasn't a side note in their year. It was their year. You imagine their calendar almost like a circle instead of a line. Akhet, Pere, the growing season, Shamu, the harvest. Then back to Akhet, back to the flood. That rhythm was everything. Forget birthdays, forget tax day. This was the true metronome, and Sirius, Sopdet, was the starter pistol. Its heliacal rising happened in mid-July, around the summer solstice, right when the Nile began to swell. Coincidence? For Egyptians, not a chance. You glance back at the horizon, and in your mind's eye you see priests with polished copper instruments tracking the star's light. Not because they were nerdy stargazers, but because those glimmers meant, get your granaries ready, sharpen your sickles, move the goats uphill. Now here's the mainstream fact everyone agrees on. The flood was caused by rainfall in the Ethiopian highlands, thousands of kilometers away. But of course, no Egyptian farmer had Google Earth or weather satellites. What they did have was Sirius, showing up on cue like a divine courier pigeon. In their eyes, Sopdet didn't predict the flood, it orchestrated it. She was goddess, timer, and weather forecaster rolled into one. Picture yourself standing on a mud brick roof, squinting east as dawn bleeds in. You see Sopdet wink into view, and suddenly all the buzzing rumors of floodwater stop being gossip. It's real. You can almost hear a farmer mutter, "She's here. The Nile will rise." That blend of superstition and lived truth probably carried a weight heavier than your modern-day weather app ever could. And let's sprinkle in a quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians tied Sirius to brewing beer. Not just floods and crops, beer. Texts hint that Sopdet was sometimes invoked alongside Hathor, goddess of intoxication, as if to say, she brings the flood, but hey, let's party about it too. Imagine farmers clinking clay mugs of foamy barley beer, toasting a star. Sirius wasn't only survival, it was a reason to celebrate before the backbreaking work of the floodplain began. Still, historians debate just how direct the link was between Sirius and agricultural scheduling. Did priests really time planting so precisely with the heliacal rising, or was it more symbolic, a holy marker of the year's turning? Some scholars argue that practical farmers simply trusted the river itself. Muddy feet don't lie. Others insist Sirius provided structure to the chaos. That debate hasn't ended. You can almost picture two Egyptologists today in khaki shorts, waving hands over a cafe table, hissing, "It was ritualistic." No, it was practical. Both sipping lattes, probably. The first signs of the flood are small, trickles creeping into irrigation channels, mud darkening around reeds, frogs throwing impromptu concerts. Then slowly, the water spreads like a blanket unrolled. You kneel by the bank, fingers brushing the rising current. It feels cool, heavy, inevitable. You glance back towards Sirius, now invisible in the daylight, but you know she's up there, keeping score. It's easy to forget how terrifying the flood could be. Too little and fields withered. Too much and villages drowned. People prayed for balance, begging the gods for the just right kind of inundation. You can almost hear a farmer muttering like Goldilocks, not too high, not too low. Except instead of porridge, it's your entire family's survival. And then there's the fringe idea some ancient Egyptians toyed with, that the Nile flood was linked not just to Sopdet, but to the very soul of Osiris. The green-skinned god of the afterlife wasn't just chilling in tomb paintings. He was, in their minds, dissolved in the river, reborn each year as the flood rose. Picture priests chanting, "Osiris lives again." Life returns Sirius above, Osiris below. The cosmic duet. It's dramatic, it's poetic, and it's the kind of thing you'd expect from people who could build pyramids on purpose, but also thought onions had magical protective powers. Your ears fill with the imagined sounds of labor. Farmers pushing wooden plows pulled by oxen, mud sloshing at their knees. Children giggling as they chase each other through puddles. Women balancing baskets of fish or reeds on their heads, moving with practiced grace. And all of it, this symphony of muddy chaos, was timed by a star. There's something haunting about the thought. In your modern world, you glance at glowing rectangles for calendars and clocks. In Egypt, you just had to look up. And maybe that's why you can feel your shoulders loosening as you imagine lying there on that mud brick roof, face tipped back, eyes locked on Sirius. No screens, no alarms. Just a star telling you, the river is coming. You'll be okay. And maybe you laugh a little to yourself because, in a way, ancient Egyptians were kind of doing the same thing you're doing right now. Looking to the sky for comfort, for a sense of timing, for reassurance that the universe isn't just chaos. Except they got mud in their sandals and you just get sleepy. The flood has arrived and you're standing ankle deep in water that stretches across the floodplain like a shimmering mirror. The Nile, once a narrow, obedient ribbon, has sprawled into fields, swallowing paths, covering stones, lapping at the edges of houses built just high enough to survive. You shift your weight and feel the mud suck at your sandals, like the land itself wants to keep you rooted here. The smell is heavy, earthy, metallic, full of life, a perfume of silt that Egyptians believed was the river's yearly gift. And with Sirius still tucked away in the daylit sky, you know this wasn't just a practical event. For Egyptians, every rising drop of water was divine choreography. Priests said it was Sopdet's announcement, Isis's tears, Osiris's rebirth, all wrapped into one muddy, irresistible tide. You imagine a group of temple priests in leopard skin cloaks chanting beside the water while children sneak splashes nearby. Ritual and reality were inseparable. You hear the croak of frogs, louder than any city traffic. Birds wheel overhead, feasting on the sudden eruption of fish brought closer to shore by the flood. This ecological explosion was part of the magic. What looked chaotic to outsiders was actually the perfect reset button. The flood leveled the playing field, fields nourished, canals refreshed, ponds teeming with food. For Egyptians, this was the universe whispering, "I've got you covered, for now." Mainstream history tells you this flood wasn't a freak accident. Every year, rainstorms in the Ethiopian highlands sent torrents of water rushing down the Blue Nile, swelling into Egypt months later. But imagine being a farmer who never saw Ethiopia, never saw the storms. From your perspective, the river simply obeyed the stars. That's where Sirius comes in, your celestial courier, explaining the inexplicable. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some villages treated the first crocodile spotted during flood season as a kind of VIP guest. They fed it offerings, not just out of fear, but respect, almost like a divine inspector making sure the flood was satisfactory. Picture yourself nervously tossing a fish to a scaly guest, praying it prefers your dinner over your leg. That's some hospitality. Yet scholars still argue over how far this religious devotion reached ordinary households. Did every peasant see Sirius as sacred, or was that mainly priestly propaganda? Did the average farmer just want to know if he'd lose his goats this season? Historians still debate whether the mythology was grassroots belief or a top-down narrative. And honestly, both could be true. You can imagine a farmer rolling his eyes at the priests chanting, but secretly whispering a prayer anyway, just in case. The flood season wasn't lazy downtime. Sure, fields lay underwater, but that just meant shifting gears. You picture farmers mending nets, sharpening sickles, repairing mud brick homes, gossiping over beer jars, maybe even sneaking into temples for a festival. Life didn't stop, it just changed rhythm. It's almost like watching Netflix buffer. You can't keep playing the show, but you still find something to do. The temples, though, oh, they feasted on symbolism during Akhet. Imagine massive ceremonies where priests floated little boats with offerings, letting them drift on the water as if delivering care packages straight to the gods. Torches flicker, chants echo, and the flooded fields glow like mirrors, reflecting the stars above. You stand there in the dark, goosebumps rising, because you can't tell where the heavens end and the Nile begins. You're tempted to laugh at one tiny detail. To predict and measure the flood, priests used a Nilometer, basically a glorified water gauge carved into stone. Picture an ancient Egyptian official standing at the steps of a well, peering down and announcing, 15 cubits, good harvest. It's not so different from a modern meteorologist pointing at colorful Doppler radar, except with more linen skirts. And here's where the stakes get real. If the Nilometer's readings promised a small flood, famine loomed. Too big a flood, and houses washed away. That narrow Goldilocks zone meant everything. Imagine waiting anxiously for someone in power to read the river's mood and announce your fate. That stress you can feel tightening in your shoulders just thinking about it. The flood doesn't last forever, of course. Weeks pass, and slowly the waters recede, leaving behind a patchwork of rich black mud. Egyptians called it Kemet, the Black Land, as opposed to the red desert beyond. This wasn't just dirt, it was divine compost. You kneel down, scoop a handful, and let it crumble through your fingers. It's cool, sticky, alive. From this mud, wheat and barley will rise, feeding a kingdom. And not to be too modern here, but the whole thing is basically the world's best natural recycling program. Floods destroy, sure, but they also reset. They leave the land richer than before. You picture an Egyptian father telling his kid, "Don't worry, this mud will feed you." It's oddly comforting, like the universe itself is tucking you in. There's a fringe idea we're slipping in. Some ancient texts suggest Egyptians believed the Milky Way was a celestial Nile reflecting their earthly river. Imagine lying on your roof at night, watching that pale streak of stars arc across the sky, and thinking, that's the Nile above and ours below. It's poetic, and it blurs the line between heaven and earth in a way only an ancient imagination could. The floodwaters retreat fully now. You hear the squelch of plows, the rhythmic slap of oxen hooves, the chatter of farmers plotting out their fields with ropes and stakes. Life pivots yet again, from survival mode to preparation, to planting, to hope. All the while, Sirius remains in its seasonal arc, silent and dependable, never apologizing for being fashionably early to the Nile's party. And you, standing there in the muck, realize just how much weight people once placed on a single point of light in the sky. No GPS, no scientific jargon, just a bright star and a rising river. And somehow, that was enough. You're walking along the temple causeway now, the stone under your bare feet warm from the day's sun. The floodwaters have pulled back, leaving the earth glossy and black, like a freshly wiped chalkboard waiting for new lessons. Farmers nearby are already scratching lines in the mud, claiming their plots with ropes, their voices bouncing between excitement and dread. But your path veers not toward the fields. It leads straight into the stone belly of Egypt's memory, the temples. Inside, the air is cool and dense, heavy with incense that clings to your nostrils like smoke from a campfire. Priests in spotless white linen move in rhythm, chanting to Sopdet, the goddess embodied by Sirius. Their voices echo in the vast halls, words bouncing off carvings of gods that stare at you from every angle. The whole place hums like an ancient amplifier. You stand still, trying not to sneeze from the incense, because honestly, nothing kills the divine mood like a poorly timed nose blast. This is where Sirius became more than a bright dot. Here it was Isis's star, the morning goddess whose tears sparked the Nile flood, who searched endlessly for Osiris. You tilt your head, imagining her story painted on walls, a grieving goddess scattering light across the sky, weeping rivers into existence. For priests, every ritual was proof, every rising flood a signature confirming her myth. Mainstream history tells you Sirius is part of Canis Major, the great dog, and its heliacal rising in midsummer matched neatly with the Nile swelling. That's not random chance, it's astronomical consistency. But you can see how Egyptians dress that coincidence in Golden Story. To them, the rising of Sirius wasn't just clockwork, it was drama, passion, and reassurance all rolled into one. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptians sometimes timed their entire calendar to Sirius's rising, not just the floods. Imagine structuring birthdays, tax deadlines, and even gossip about who's late to work based on whether a star showed up. Talk about cosmic HR management. But scholars still argue whether the worship of Sirius was truly universal or largely priestly business. Was your average fisherman staring up at dawn, whispering thanks to Sopdet? Or was he just muttering about catching enough catfish to feed his kids? Historians still debate whether the cult of Sirius touched the grassroots or remained cloistered within temple walls. You can picture both, the devout priest clutching a sacred papyrus and the weary farmer rolling his eyes before muttering a quick, just-in-case prayer at the horizon. Outside, festivals burst with life. The Akhet season wasn't just about mud and labor. It was theater. You see dancers spinning in circles, musicians plucking harps, kids chasing each other through the crowd. Sirius isn't just a star here, it's an excuse to party. You almost laugh when a man wearing a dog-headed mask trips over a jar of beer, sending froth spilling like a foamy sacrifice to the earth. Religion meets slapstick. The temples had a knack for grandeur. Priests might release model boats onto reflecting pools, each one carrying offerings to Sopdet, Isis, and Osiris. Torches flare, the stars shimmer above, and suddenly the whole ritual feels like a cosmic mirror. Stars in the heavens, lights on the water, all twinkling together. You're caught in a moment where it's hard to tell whether you're standing in a temple or floating in the universe. And then there's the sacred animals. You see cats darting between statues, cows adorned with flowers, ibis birds strutting like feathered professors, reminding everyone that nature was just as divine as the stone gods carved overhead. Some priests claim Sirius guided not just floods, but the rhythms of animal life too. And you can imagine an Egyptian scholar scribbling furiously on papyrus as he tracks when his goats get feisty each year. You stop at a wall relief showing Sopdet herself, a woman crowned with a star on her head, sometimes carrying a water jug. You trace the carving with your eyes, noticing how the artist made her gaze upward, as if she too is waiting for something. She doesn't look like an untouchable goddess. She looks like someone who knows more than you and won't spoil the ending. It's oddly comforting and mildly frustrating. A priest nearby drops a small joke, telling a novice that if Sirius is late one year, it means Sopdet overslept. You smirk, realizing humor has always crept into holy places. Because let's face it, humans can't stay serious forever, even when talking to the stars. And just when you're feeling lulled by the chanting, a new sound cuts through, the stomp of feet. A group of soldiers strides past, their armor glinting in torchlight. Even they pause, bow slightly and glance skyward. It hits you. Sirius wasn't just farmers and priests. It seeped into every corner of Egyptian society, even the military. If a star can unite warriors and priests, you know it's more than a twinkle. By the time you leave the temple, the night sky is wide and clean, dotted with stars. Sirius gleams low on the horizon, sharp as a diamond chip. You breathe in the cool night air, the chants fading behind you, and it feels like Egypt itself is holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. You're drifting now, not through temple halls or fields of mud, but deeper into the idea itself, the cosmic reason Sirius mattered at all. The star hangs above the horizon, brighter than almost anything else, like a lantern lit just for you. You tilt your head and let your eyes soften, because in the stillness you realize it wasn't just Egyptians who looked up and thought, that one's special. Sirius is a show-off star, and civilizations across the globe noticed. Still, you focus on Egypt, because here the story isn't just astronomy, it's survival. Imagine standing by the riverbank each year, your stomach twisting with uncertainty. Will the Nile flood enough to feed us, or will it hold back and starve us? Then, like clockwork, Sirius shows up in the dawn sky, and the very next thing you see is the river swelling. Cause and effect? Not really. Comfort and ritual? Absolutely. You can't blame them. If a star kept promising you lunch, you'd start bowing to it too. Mainstream fact: the heliacal rising of Sirius occurred in mid-July, just before the annual inundation. It was so precise that Egyptians used it to reset their civil calendar, ensuring their year stayed aligned with the seasons. Modern astronomers nod and say, yes, that tracks. But back then, farmers leaned on it like a cosmic weather app, long before radar maps and bored meteorologists in suits. Here's the quirky tidbit. Egyptians may have connected Sirius not only to water and floods, but to dogs. Its Greek name means scorching, but in Egypt it was tied to Anubis, the jackal-headed god of death. Think about that. A star both feeding you and escorting you to the afterlife. It's like the universe saying, dinner first, funeral later. But historians still argue whether Egyptians universally saw Sirius as Isis, Sopdet, or something else entirely. Was there a single narrative, or did different villages whisper their own versions? Some scholars think peasants saw it as a practical marker, while priests spun myths around it. Others believe stories filtered down, shaping how even fishermen explained why the river rose. You picture them arguing over a campfire. One swears it's Isis's tears, another mutters it's just the gods turning on the irrigation system, ancient style. You walk farther into the night, and the floodplain around you changes in your mind's eye. You see it not as mud and reeds, but as a canvas of stars. Each shimmering dot up there mirrors something down here. Fields, temples, pyramids. Egyptians built whole city layouts echoing the heavens. Orion for Osiris, Sirius for Isis. The ground was their reflection pool, the sky their blueprint. It's hard not to smirk. Ancient architecture was basically cosmic fan fiction. Priests knew this, and they milked it. Ceremonies staged at dawn, torches held high, chants thrown into the morning air, all synchronized with Sirius's entrance, like an opening act at a rock concert. The Astronomy star appeared, and boom, the temple choir hit the high note. You can almost hear it, their voices cracking, some off-pitch but still devoted. You chuckle softly because, let's be real, every choir has that one guy who thinks he's louder than the gods. Meanwhile, everyday Egyptians mark the moment in quieter ways. You picture a mother nudging her child awake, pointing at the faint light of Sirius, whispering, "There it is. It means the river will rise." Or a farmer pausing mid-yawn, muttering a quick thank you before trudging back to mend his boat. The star lived in both grandeur and routine, both incense and mud. And then there were omens. Some Egyptians believed Sirius could also warn of disasters if its glow looked faint or flickering. Priests scribbled notes, arguing about whether dimness foretold famine or plague. It's a bit like blaming your Wi-Fi for everything. Sometimes it's the router, sometimes it's just you staring too hard at the blinking light. You keep walking, and suddenly the floodplain dissolves into darkness. The stars crowd closer, pressing against your skin like cool mist. Sirius shines sharper, almost bossy. You realize this is the rhythm of belief, precision wrapped in poetry, survival dressed in myth. Sirius wasn't just a celestial event, it was a character in their lives. Another odd thought. Did Egyptians ever get bored of the whole thing? Year after year, Sirius rises, the Nile floods, rinse and repeat. You imagine some weary farmer sighing, "Yes, yes, the goddess is crying again. Please let me get back to my onions." The truth is probably both, all mixed with routine, wonder blended with weariness. By now, your eyelids feel heavier, like weighted papyrus rolls stacked gently over them. The chanting from temples has faded. Even the frogs in the canals seem quieter. Sirius still burns overhead, but it feels less like a flare and more like a lullaby light dimming your mind. The myths, the floods, the debates, they all melt together into a single glow. You no longer separate fact from faith, priest from farmer, Nile from sky. It's all one soft tide, carrying you further into stillness. Your breath slows. The river inside your head rises and falls in time with the cosmos. Sirius steadies itself in your gaze, no longer a harbinger or a goddess, just a star, patient, steady, eternal. And you, wrapped in the vast night, are part of its quiet rhythm. End of script. Sweet dreams.